The pottery studio I built for her became the kiln where she fired a new life with my mentor. A truth that revealed itself not through a cracked vase or a discovered message, but through the immutable memory of clay itself. Clay is a truthful medium. It holds every impression, every hesitant push, every confident thumbprint. It doesn't lie. The studio was my love letter to Anya, constructed over 9 months of stolen weekends and aching muscles. It wasn't just a shed, it was a temple to her abandoned artistry. She had been a promising potter in art school, but the practical demands of our life together, had forced her into graphic design, a clean, digital world that paid the bills but left her soul parched. I saw the longing in her eyes whenever she passed a ceramics shop. So, for our 5th anniversary, I decided to give her back her dreams. But I was an engineer, not an artist. I could design the structure, run the electrical, insulate the walls. But the heart of a pottery studio is the kiln. It's a delicate, dangerous beast. Get it wrong, and you risk everything from ruined work to a fire that could consume it all. That's where David came in. David was a legend in our small city's arts community. A master potter in his late 50s whose hands seemed to converse directly with the earth. His studio was a chaotic, beautiful cave of fired creations. I approached him humbly, offering to pay for lessons not in throwing pots, but in building the kiln itself. I wanted to understand its soul, its rhythm, its dangers. I wanted to build something perfect for her. David took me on. He was a patient, if somewhat distant, teacher. He had a quiet intensity, speaking more through demonstration than words. Under his guidance, I learned about refractory brick, about thermal mass, about the precise angles of the flue that would ensure an even, controllable fire. I mixed the mortar. I laid the bricks with painstaking care, each one a prayer for her happiness. "You build this like you love someone," David remarked once, watching me check the level for the 100th time. "That's the only way it ever holds." I nodded, my throat tight. He had no idea how right he was. The studio was finished in early spring. When I led Anya to it, blindfolded, and removed the cloth, she didn't scream or jump for joy. She went utterly silent. Then, tears began a quiet trek down her cheeks. She walked in, running her fingers over the smooth countertops I'd sanded for hours, the custom shelving, the brand new, gleaming wheel. Then she saw the kiln, its brickwork proud and solid in the corner. She recognized the craftsmanship. "You didn't just buy this," she whispered. "No," I said. "David taught me. I built it." She turned and kissed me with a ferocity that felt like absolution, like a reward for every splinter and strained back. For a year, the studio was a paradise. The smell of wet clay and bisqueware seeped into our clothes, our hair, our life. Anya bloomed. The tired, slightly distant woman I'd grown accustomed to was replaced by a vibrant, focused artist, often covered in slip, her eyes alight with creation. She made beautiful things. Elegant vases, whimsical mugs, sculptural pieces that seemed to capture light. I was her biggest fan, her willing assistant, firing the kiln according to her schedules, mixing glazes from David's complex recipes. David became a frequent visitor. Officially, he was Anya's mentor, helping her refine her technique, pushing her artistic boundaries. He'd come over, and they'd disappear into the studio for hours, the low murmur of their voices mixing with the hum of the wheel. I was glad. I was grateful. He was giving her the guidance I never could. I'd bring them iced tea, see their heads bent close over a misshapen pot, David's large, weathered hands gently correcting the position of Anya's smaller ones on the clay. It was a picture of artistic communion. I felt a pang sometimes, a minor chord of exclusion, but I swatted it away. This was her world. I was the architect of the space, the keeper of the fire, but the art was theirs. My role was support. The first fissure appeared on a piece of junk mail. A credit card statement for an account I didn't recognize, addressed to Anya. When I asked, she waved it off, a little too quickly. "Oh, that old thing. I opened it for studio supplies, better rewards. Must have used the old address. I'll update it." The explanation was smooth, plausible, but a cold seed of doubt was planted. Engineers deal in systems, in inputs and outputs. An anomaly is a symptom of a flaw in the design. I began, almost against my will, to notice other anomalies. The specific, sandalwood clay scent David always carried, lingering in our bedroom after Anya had spent a long, solo firing day. The way she started using artistic terms David favored, phrases she'd never used before. The new, expensive locking toolbox in the studio for her special tools, a box to which I had no key. The data points were accumulating, but they were circumstantial, emotional. I needed physical proof. Clay, I remembered, is truthful. One Wednesday, Anya announced she was going to a week-long ceramics retreat in the mountains with David and a few other artists. A chance for intensive, immersive work. She packed her bags with a nervous energy that felt like excitement. "I'll miss you," she said, kissing me goodbye. Her kiss tasted of guilt and toothpaste. The moment her card disappeared, I went to the studio. It was tidy, as always, but on a wedging board, covered by a damp cloth, was a lump of clay she'd been preparing, and beside it, a single, unfinished vase. It was a beautiful, tall, elegant form, but it was the surface that stopped my heart. It was covered in fingerprints, not just the smooth, finished prints of someone handling a completed piece, but the deep, intentional impressions of creation. There were small, delicate prints, and overlaying them, intersecting with them, pressed into the same soft clay, were larger, broader prints, a man's prints. They weren't just on different parts of the vase, they were in dialogue. A large thumb had smoothed a rim where a small finger had shaped it. The patterns were intimate, a record of four hands working in concert on a single form. This wasn't a student-mentor correction. This was a collaboration of equals, a shared intimacy pressed into the very skin of the object. It was a fossil of betrayal. I stood in the silent studio, the smell of clay now smelling of deceit. My hands, the hands that had mixed the mortar for their altar, were shaking. I didn't destroy the vase. I photographed it from every angle, the harsh light of my phone flash highlighting every damning print. Then I left it exactly as it was. The kiln, the great brick beast I had built with such devotion, seemed to leer at me. The next week was an eternity. I performed my life like a robot. I went to work, I ate, I slept in fitful bursts. The anomaly was no longer an anomaly, it was a confirmed system failure. I just needed to understand the full scope of the design flaw. When Anya returned, she was glowing, talking a mile a minute about reduction firings and wood-ash glazes. She was more in love with her art than ever. And, I realized with a sinking finality, she was more in love with David. I began my own quiet project. While Anya thought I was working late, I was learning. I accessed the studio's security camera feed, a simple system I'd installed for theft prevention, which she'd always forgotten about. I reviewed the archives from the days before her retreat. There they were, not just working, laughing in a way she never laughed with me, his hand resting on the small of her back as he leaned over to examine a glaze test. A moment, caught in grainy silence, where she reached up and wiped a smudge of clay from his cheek. Their body language was a language of its own, fluent and familiar. I followed the digital trail. The unknown credit card was used for hotels in the city where David's gallery shows were held. On weekends when I was away at engineering conferences, I found emails, not on our shared computer, but by recovering a backup from an old laptop. They were poetic, filled with artistic and sensual metaphor. "Your hands shaped the clay, and you shaped me," David had written. "The kiln fires nothing to the heat you stir in me," she had replied. They spoke of the studio as their sanctuary, of the future they would build once they had fired their old lives away. I was the old life, the bisque square that needed to be glazed over or shattered. The rage that came was not a fire, but a cold, calculating heat, the kind of heat needed for a high-fire glaze, the kind that transforms something soft into something hard, brittle, and permanent. I planned my own firing. I waited for Anya to announce another retreat, this one a weekend at David's remote cabin studio for a rock firing workshop. She packed her bag with the same barely contained excitement. This time, I didn't just let her go. I activated the plan. First, I sent a meticulously compiled portfolio, the photographs of the fingerprinted vase, screenshots of the most damning emails, receipts, timelines to the board of the Arts Council where David held a prestigious, publicly funded position. The subject line, ethical conduct of a public arts mentor. Second, I contacted the owner of the gallery that represented David. I posed as a concerned collector, mentioning the disturbing rumors about the master potter's personal conduct with students, suggesting it might affect the value and perception of his work. I planted seeds of professional doubt. Third, and most crucially, I worked on the studio itself. I went to the city planning department. I pulled the permits for my own construction, and I found a problem. A small, deliberate problem. The kiln's flue, as built according to David's specifications and under his guidance, was a fraction of an inch out of code for its proximity to the property line. A code David, as a professional, should have known. It was a violation so minor it was never caught, but it was a violation. I filed an anonymous complaint with the building safety office, citing a concerned neighbor who smelled smoke. Then, I invited the local fire marshal for a courtesy inspection. expressing my worry about the kiln's safety. The trap was set. The Arts Council moved swiftly and quietly. David was suspended pending an investigation, his reputation crumbling. The gallery, sensing scandal, put his upcoming solo show on indefinite hold. Anya returned from her weekend pale and shaken. David, she mumbled, was dealing with some professional jealousies. She retreated to the studio, her sanctuary, to find solace in the clay. 2 days later, a city inspector and the fire marshal appeared at our door. I played the confused, cooperative husband. The inspection was thorough. The code violation was discovered. The kiln I had built, the kiln David had designed, was officially deemed unsafe to operate and red-tagged. It would require a costly, permitted rebuild to ever be used again. Anya was devastated. It was the destruction of her sacred space. She ranted about bureaucracy, about small-mindedness. I held her, saying all the right things. "We'll fix it, honey. We'll get through this." But the heart of her studio, the source of its heat and life, was legally, irrevocably dead. The final confrontation happened in the now-cold studio. She was staring at the red tag on the kiln like it was a death certificate. I walked in, holding a single printout, the clearest photo of the fingerprinted vase. I didn't say anything. I just placed it on the wedging table next to a lump of cold, unforgiving clay. She looked at it. Her face, already drawn from stress, collapsed in on itself. She didn't try to deny it. The evidence was in the clay. "How long?" I asked, my voice terrifyingly calm. She told me. It had started during the kiln construction, with shared lunches, with conversations about art and life that I was too busy building to have with her. The mentorship had curdled into something else. Fired in the heat of shared passion, a passion I had facilitated, built the very vessel for. "He understands me," she sobbed, "in a way you never tried to." "I built you a world," I said, looking at the brick monstrosity in the corner. "And you used it to build a world without me, with the man who showed me where to place the bricks." I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I just presented the consequences. David's career is over. Your studio is dead. The art you made here is tainted. You have a choice. You can be with him in the ruins of what you both broke, or you can stay here, in the ruins of what I built for you. But you can't have both. The kiln won't fire again. I left her there, surrounded by the ghost of her passion, the silent, accusing forms of her creations lining the shelves. She moved out a week later. She went to David, but the man she went to was not the master potter anymore. He was a disgraced, aging artist facing professional oblivion. His own studio a place of whispers and pity. The heat of their secret romance couldn't survive the cold air of exposure and consequence. I heard they split up within months. The studio still stands in my backyard. I had the kiln professionally dismantled, brick by brick. I keep the space as a storage shed now. Sometimes, I go in there. It still smells faintly of clay. I keep a single brick from the kiln on my desk. It's heavy, ugly, and cold. It is the only piece of my love letter I have left. The pottery studio I built for her did not fire our love into permanence. It became the kiln where she, with my mentor, fired a new life that ultimately cracked under the very heat they thought would strengthen it. And I was left with the ashes and the profound, unshakable knowledge that some things, once broken, can never truly be glued back together. They can only be swept away, leaving behind an empty space where something beautiful was supposed to grow.